Welcome to video 4. We're continuing looking at the 3D viewport and the features and options that it has built into it. We left off right here in the last time, covering the rest of this in this video. And in this first little section here, we see these little boxes. Those are the layers. And we have 20 layers. Layers are a fantastic way to help separate parts of your scene out, especially as they get more complex. For instance, in this scene, I might want my camera and my light source to be on different layers. To move those, I just hit M, and I can select whatever layer I want them to be on. I'm going to select layer 19. In the layer numbering, it starts with 0 here and goes all the way to 19. I'm going to click there. Now I can see a dot here and I can see a dot there because I have objects on those layers. This one is pressed in, so I'm currently seeing what's on that layer. If I click this layer, I see my camera and my light source. If I hold down Shift and select that layer 0, I can see everything there now all together. If I press 1, it actually does reference this on the keyboard, and this is one of the reasons why we don't use the keys above the letters, the number keys above the letters, because they reference layer spots. And so the 2 represents spot 1, and the only reason why I even bother with the confusion of that is because if you hover over the layers, it'll tell you that this is layer 1, even though key 2 actually references it. So the numbers on top of the keyboard work the way that most people would just kind of think. 1's first box, 2, 3, 4, 5, going all the way down until you get to 0 being 10. And which is kind of handy. You can also, again, select them just by clicking on them. Hold Shift down to select any layers that you want in your scene. Great way to separate items out. I'm going to go ahead and just press 1, so I'm on my layer 0. And over here, right next to that, we have a thing that says use the scene's active camera and layers in this view rather than local layers. And I'm thinking that has to do with if you move your camera and stuff to another layer. I've never tried it before to see how that changes things, which in that I got the same camera view even though my camera is on this layer and it's over there. Which is not quite the same as seeing it here. When I have it together, I see it just fine. I'm going to click off of that one, and yeah, so it's just another way of seeing things. I think that's where it's linked, actually. This next item is the proportional editing tool. Oops, and let me select an item here. So proportional editing, and proportional editing actually changes the way that items are treated, particularly in edit view, although anytime that you're moving an object, it can affect it proportionally. So if I click on this and I turn this on, which I just did by clicking on it, I can change how it reaches. So the middle of it is where it's pulling the most, and the sides, they kind of fade off. This one would be constant, linear, etc. And so if I hold down, if I hit G for move, and you notice this circle here, if I expand that circle out to include the objects, it pulls at the other object in the scene. If I zoom out, if I scroll the wheel to make this circle smaller, that circle is the area of influence that from when I originally was moving the item. And the larger I make that circle, the more pull it has on whatever was closest to it. In fact, we could take this and do put a few circles out here just to give us a little bit better example. To duplicate the way I was doing there, you do Shift D. You can also do Alt D, which will make a duplicate. Again, we'll get into that later. But this is a duplicate that actually will change as, if you change one, you change the other one. Whereas these are now separate objects. So I have my proportional editing enabled. I'm going to hit G for move. The grab tool basically is what the G stands for. And so right now my circle of influence is really big. If I scroll that down, here it's shorter, and as I expand that out, I can adjust all of those a little bit back and forth. And so that can be a really, really handy tool, especially when you're in edit mode and want to do kind of changes that gradually pull at something. If you change the mode, for instance, if I go to random and let's say I hit G again for move, and I'm going to expand this out, it's pulling randomly at the different areas a little bit. Some are getting more, some are getting less, and that's again another way of playing around with things that can help make terrain too. You can use it lots of different ways. Smooth is usually the default. You can also do, as you start to move things around, let me turn off proportional editing for this one. You can turn on the snap to grid, and you notice that it's kind of jumpy as I'm moving it back and forth. It's lining up with those grid marks, and I could actually probably see things better if I hadn't distorted things and moved them around and stuff. But you can change what actually lines up with the different snap elements. And so you can play around with that. And there's some different options. So snap to increment of grid, you can work with those too as well. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for now. Over here we have the OpenGL renderer, which is, it'll just take a view of the active viewport. And so if I click on this, this is just rendering the way it is. It's very, very fast. If you want a preview of a complicated scene, you could do that even with the animation to see it. I'm going to switch back to my 3D view, and can be kind of a useful tool for that. For our next segment, we're going to get into the tools menu, but I also want to be able to go and talk about how we edit an object. And so you can change to edit mode here, or I like to just use tab to edit in something. Remember I said that these were linked duplicates, so that because of that they actually look the same. We now have some different options that appeared here, including the menu for vertex, edge, and face. And switch to face edit, and if I select, there we are, this is the one I'm tabbed into actually. I'm going to select face edit, and I'm going to hit E for extrude, and I can pull that out. I can do S for scale, E again for extrude, and you notice that since they're linked, those two change at the same time. And so we're going to get into some more editing in the next video and see how our menu changes between edit mode and object mode. Right now we're in object mode.